I came across a Dan Koh video, like many people that started on X. It started with Dan Koh, and he was this guy who, he's on the internet. He talks with no expression on his face in a monotone about these kind of nerdy philosophical topics. And, I think for me, I'm introverted. I come from a pretty nerdy kind of background in tech and design, and I really kind of resonated with him. I think something struck a chord that, someone like him doing what he's doing could become successful building, a personal brand or a solopreneur business. And I've always loved writing. I've never written in a formal capacity, but I've always had to write, especially now, in my role at the moment. I write a lot of presentations for CEOs and founders. I help them write pitches, when they go to pitch to their venture capitalists and for investment and stuff like that. And so I've always had to write in quite a compelling way, and I really enjoy it. And so
maybe let's start with your background. You mentioned you worked for Disney and a couple of interesting projects. Could you talk about that?
Yeah. So look, my background, I originally started in corporate IT, and I did that for 3 or so years, big corporate telecommunications companies and stuff like that, and financial services. But I really didn't enjoy it. And so I actually ended up changing careers. So I went back to study design. And then after I studied design, I worked for a whole bunch of different companies and startups and stuff like that. And for a while, I was freelancing. So I think for the period of about 5 years, I was taking up freelance contracts. And this one day, this recruiter that I had been working with for a couple of years, he had a contract with Disney kind of land on his desk. And so he put me forward for that. And so I worked there for about a year. And during my time, I kind of worked on the marketing campaigns, Star Wars, The Force Awakens, for Inside Out, for The Good Dinosaur, and also for Ant-Man. So I'm not sure if you're familiar, but, obviously Disney owns the Marvel franchise and the Star Wars franchise as well. And so that was my time there. Yeah.
That sounds pretty cool. You mentioned that you've been building other people's dreams, but not necessarily your dream. For many people, working for such a large organization as Disney or Marvel would have a lot of pride involved with it. What about it is not part of your dream?
When I was younger, it probably was my dream. I dreamed when I was a designer to work on, these big high profile projects that would be fun with brands that, I grew up with. And so, working at Disney was definitely a dream come true. I definitely don't want to play that down. But I think, it was always building someone else's vision is probably a better way to put it. And, over the years, especially in the past 10 years, I've worked, right now, I work at a tech consultancy, and my specialization is with startup projects. And so when, a client comes through the door with a new venture, I'm usually the one that's kind of on that and leading the strategic element of it. And so, I've always been the person who supports the founder's vision and helps bring that vision to life, right? And so now I think, now that I'm on the creator journey, I think it's the first time that I feel like I'm bringing like my own kind of vision to life, if that makes sense.
Totally. That's a really hard transition, surprisingly, I find. It's easy sometimes to spot someone else's problems or solutions to their problems, help them reach their goals, but sometimes very difficult to do that for yourself. How have you kind of started to make that transition?
Yeah, it's definitely hard because I've always felt like I wanted to start something for myself, but I never had something that I actually wanted to do enough to actually do it. And honestly, I wasn't really looking for it at the time. Really, the story is that I was, in December, I was traveling with my girlfriend in Thailand. She's from Thailand. And so we were just having a good time. And then, during transit, I came across a Dan Koh video. And, like many people that started on X, it started with Dan Koh. And he was this guy who, he's on the internet. He talks with no expression on his face in a monotone about these kind of nerdy philosophical topics. And, I think for me, I'm introverted. I come from a pretty nerdy kind of background in tech and design. And I really kind of resonated with him. And I think something struck a chord that someone like him doing what he's doing could become successful building, a personal brand or a solopreneur business. And I've always loved writing. I've never written in a formal capacity, but I've always had to write, especially now, in my role at the moment, I write a lot of presentations for CEOs and founders. I help them write pitches, when they go to pitch to their venture capitalists and for investment and stuff like that. And so I've always had to write in quite a compelling way, and I really enjoy it. And so I think it all just came together when, I learned that you could create a personal brand business just by writing online. And so that's kind of what drew me in. And when I started, I didn't really know what I was doing. I kind of just opened my Twitter account. I started writing my random thoughts. And then slowly, I started finding some traction and then enjoying it more and more. And the journey, has kind of unfolded. I haven't really planned it out or anything like that. So
I think difficult to plan out the future, but you can experiment and iterate, take in data, update your models. Regarding consulting, I've learned a little bit about that in business school and dabbled in it here and there, perhaps not to your level. But what surprised me was how you try to make order out of chaos. Like you're limited, otherwise you just experiment forever, but you're out, the client's paying you a lot of money. You have to deliver a high probability of success within a limited time frame. So you're making a lot of decisions, and us living in chaos and storytelling being vitally important. I think a lot of times you have to find evidence to support a story. And realistically, you could have infinite stories and find evidence to support that. So with consulting, how do you decide this is the best solution for this particular client?
For the client, so are we talking about my professional consulting background or my creator consulting journey that I'm on right now?
I was initially thinking about your professional, like your tech consulting, but I suppose you could apply it to the creator consulting, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, okay. Oh, maybe we can do both. So for clients, when they come through the door right now, it's mostly strategic consulting. So usually the client has a new product idea. Some of the clients are also new ventures, so it's a new business, but some of the clients are well-established brands, and so they have an idea for a new product. So whatever it is, it's kind of a new product. And most clients, they come through the door with pieces of the puzzle missing. So they have some deep expertise in one area where they're very clear about what the product is, but then there are other areas where usually they'll be lacking. So for example, the idea was a product that is a human digital twin. And what you can do with that human digital twin is surgeons can use basically like VR and haptics to kind of simulate a surgery. There's a big problem right now in the surgery space, I guess you could say, where it's very, very hard to practice surgery, right? And so if you want to practice in a very immersive environment, it requires human cadavers, which obviously they're one-time use, extremely, extremely expensive and very, very rare. And there's nothing in between, right? Other than that, there are surgeons that are practicing on apples and oranges, right, to practice their skills. And so the idea was a VR product where you can kind of practice, and there's a simulated human that you can practice on. And so they come in with a very, very deep expertise in terms of the medical background, the surgery background, obviously, but they don't really know how to turn that into a digital product. And there's usually a bit of lacking in terms of like thinking about the product in terms of how you're going to market it, how you're going to sell it, how long it's going to take to build, what to build first in terms of like a minimum viable product. I come in, basically help them fill in the gaps to the point where everyone feels confident moving forward with the project, because most tech projects, they require hundreds of thousands, if not millions of investment to kind of build that first version. So I guess to answer your question, your question was around how do you get to the point where you choose the right story? Honestly, it kind of comes back down to money. It's kind of getting to a point where the strategy and the vision and the direction and the rationale behind it is strong enough that people feel comfortable investing, however much money they need to invest to actually build it. So, yeah.
They say constraint is the mother of all invention, like your limitations. So I guess you start there. And if you have kind of a starting point and end point, you see where they need to get, you see the gap. I assume it's the shortest possible direction. And I wonder, you seem like very creative, you dabbled in many different kind of industries. What's the tension in you between like just finishing the job like as quickly and cheaply as possible versus experimenting and innovating and coming up with a novel solution?
The way that I navigate that actually is, so there's something called hypothesis-based thinking, and it kind of ties into MVP. I'm not sure if you've heard of, minimum viable product or lean startup product.
I have.
Yes. And so the premise behind that is when you have an idea, rather than just kind of getting really excited about the idea and all the wonderful bells and whistles that you can throw onto it, you think about a hypothesis around, so what are the hypotheses that need to be validated to be true for this product to be successful, right? And it's usually market-based and it's usually customer-based. You basically design the MVP, so the minimum kind of features that are required to validate or invalidate that hypothesis, right? So you're not trying to build something that's guaranteed to succeed. You're trying to build the minimum that you need to build to either prove or disprove, the product vision and the product idea. And, if we are able to effectively disprove the hypothesis with the least amount of investment possible, that's still considered a success. And so you don't go in with a mindset that, whatever venture or product you're trying to build is definitely going to be successful, because that's just not reality. You're just trying to figure it out with the least amount of time and effort and money involved.
Is the digital twin project still ongoing, or have you finished that?
So we just finished the discovery phase. So the discovery phase is basically hashing out the strategy, as well as the high-level direction for the product, as well as defining the MVP. So what we think is the first thing that needs to be built, along with like an investment forecast in terms of how much we think it's going to cost and how long it's going to take to build it. And so that's back with the client at the moment. And they're basically going to go and try and fundraise and see if they can bring the build of the project kind of together.
It sounds like you're living the dream, but you say this isn't your vision. I'm curious, what's calling you? You said you're an introvert, and perhaps parts of this job don't speak to introversion. Like, what could you elaborate a little bit on what the pull is to go your own way?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the idea of a digital twin is not my vision, right? Like, I didn't wake up one day and think that would be an amazing thing to build, and that's what I want to do. I'm not a doctor or a surgeon, obviously, so I would never ever come up with something like that. And so, yeah, look, the project is a dream to work on from a professional perspective, but it's not my vision in terms of, something that I want to bring into the world. I'm just helping someone else bring it into the world.
I see. I still think that's admirable and pretty interesting, but different strokes, I suppose. So what is it that you would like to do? Do you have an idea of what your vision is, where it's leading you?
Yeah. So look, it's pretty much your typical make money with a solopreneur business, right? And specifically, I think for me, it's around writing and probably coaching. I quite enjoy coaching and building a personal brand. I think that's one of the things that is it's on trend at the moment. And I really enjoy it because it allows me to bring my personal life into kind of the way that I support myself financially. And it is a lifestyle. Like, I think really for me, I want to build a lifestyle business where, I'm kind of in control of my time, in control of my income. I can kind of work from wherever I want, whenever I want, as long as I get it done. And we can kind of see where it goes from there. And that's the beauty of a personal brand, is that you can evolve with you, right? You're not pigeonholed into staying in one space. The kind of direction for the brand can evolve as your interest evolves as well. So I know that probably doesn't answer your question fully, but I think the vision is more than just a project or a business, but it's also how it plays into my lifestyle as well. So, yeah.
I see. So it's almost like you're focusing on the spaceship, and you trust that wherever you go in the galaxy, you'll be fine because your personal brand is developed enough. I don't know if that analogy works for you, but it sounds kind of like you're in the adventure phase. You've dabbled in a lot of different domains, particularly in consulting. You have different problems to solve. and you're exposed to different ideas, um, kind of like almost like infinitely, because I imagine on your team, someone will have a perspective that's different from yours, that gives you an idea that's different from theirs. And it's just kind of, you riff off of that to an extent. Obviously, you're constrained by time and money, but it kind of makes sense that you're focusing on getting ready for the unknown rather than knowing where you're going.
Absolutely. Even just for me so far, I've changed directions a few times, and it kind of affords you the ability to do that, which I actually I really love that, actually, the unknown, as you put it.
I think storytelling is becoming more known as kind of the fabric of our species, and it's vitally important. It forms sense-making algorithms in our mind that affects how we interpret data coming in from the environment. And there's this tension once again between like retaining an algorithm and updating it. And I think change is coming obviously faster and faster with AI and a variety of other factors. So your ability to kind of communicate concepts and ideas while also improving or increasing your ability to receive ideas and communication, I think is going to become more and more important. And that's at the crux of what I call the entrepreneurial mindset, and being able to kind of plug in to a new module, if you will, be that Australia or strategy consulting or AI or whatever comes next, and kind of repurposing a lot of your investment in intellectual capital, energy, and all that. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So in terms of storytelling, even if we just tie it back to, I guess, my journey in terms of a personal brand and building a personal brand, storytelling really has become one of the most important things that I do for it. And it forced me, building this personal brand forced me to change my communication style, at least in terms of how I write on Twitter. And the reason for that is, when I first started writing on Twitter, I wrote, the way that I would write for work, which is it's in the language of how to, and you should, because that's what I get paid to do at work, right? So I teach people how to do things. I tell them what they should do. But that really doesn't resonate with a kind of an online audience. And what I've learned is actually now to start framing what I write around so telling how I did something, and rather than just generic general information that I guess you can kind of Google or you could write using AI, the way that you stand out is actually telling your story and using that as a platform to share insights, share lessons, share even technical knowledge you can share through the lens of your own personal experience. And so I think if we zoom out, because that's, I guess, my experience on Twitter, but if we zoom out to the wider landscape, where AI is becoming so prominent and technology is developing so quickly, I really think it's our personal experiences and our ability to storytell around our personal experiences in order to deliver information is really going to be the kind of the compelling element that stands out, in a sea of kind of general information that is now becoming easier and easier and easier to create, right?
I was telling someone in a DM earlier today that basically there's 8 billion simulations going on right now, because we are at once an individual, but also a group organism. And we each have our own reality, sports team, religion, language, all that stuff. And we test, like you mentioned, testing minimum viable product. We have however many years, a few decades that we're here in this form. And you test these models and then you update the group organism, and what's useful remains. And you're, part of the overall, human life force or whatever life force and, the Earth or the galaxy, etc. So it's interesting when you see AI improving and advancing, and it's like exponential. We as humans in our organic intelligence are also adapting, as we always have. So it is really interesting. We're kind of like an organic supercomputer, where as we get better and the barriers to communication and comprehension become less and less, I don't know if it's necessarily like part for part we're keeping up with AI, but I think we're kind of inimitable in that respect. Like we're, apples and oranges, I suppose. So yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen, but I definitely feel like you're right about the personal brand and kind of moving in that direction, getting better at communicating. And what you said too, I think was really insightful with communicating, this is what I did, instead of you should. And that was something that I learned as well. I don't know if we're taught to speak like that, like you should or something, but I was speaking to a mentor, and he had a mentor, and I asked him, like, how do you like communicate with your mentors? Like, because he was a CEO, and I was like, what is it like being at that level and having people like tell you, quote unquote, what to do? And he told me they don't really tell me what to do, they just tell me what they did, and that kind of helps. And it's like I had this epiphany where it's like, oh, you're kind of giving the other person respect and acknowledging that your way isn't the only way, but also you leave the door open for them. It's almost like a video game. Like they enter into that environment and they can see, okay, this is what would happen. And then maybe I would do this instead, or maybe this is why they did that. And so I think it also, like the uptake is a lot quicker at that point. It's because like you should, there's almost like this unconscious barrier where it's like, how do you know? Or I don't know, there's so many reasons why it might not resonate right away. Whereas it's like, this is what I did. Yeah, we kind of connect to that on an empathetic level. Like, oh, that's what Johnny did. I guess I'll try it out too.
Absolutely. It's interesting, right? Because I think it's weird. Maybe my tastes have changed, but now when I read you should type of content, I'm quite conscious of there's a barrier, there's a bit of a wall that you put up to that, I think. And I don't know why or how that happens, but when someone starts with telling their own story, you're kind of drawn in rather than kind of, I don't know what the feeling is or what it is, but it's just you're less receptive in that kind of frame.
It's kind of ironic because when you just said that too, I was thinking like, but I mean it in the best way. It's like, you should do this because I care about you. I'm telling you, you should do this, but it has the opposite effect. Whereas if I say, this is what I did, it has the effect that I wanted to have originally.
Yep. It's very interesting.
What are some of your other like creators? You mentioned Dan Koh was inspirational for you. I imagine by this point you have a few.
I do, but not in the Twitter space, mostly on YouTube. So watching YouTube is one of my favorite pastimes, and I do that a lot. There's a guy called Dr. K. He runs a channel called Healthy Gamer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Oh, yes. He's brilliant.
Yeah, I'm thinking about writing a post about him actually, because a lot of his content literally like changed my life, I think.
I look forward to checking it out when you do.
Yeah. I'll definitely do that. And so Healthy Gamer is one. I think one of the first original creators back before being a creator was a thing, Mark Manson.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I was reading his stuff like over 10 years ago when he was writing his blogs. So I think Mark Manson is definitely one as well. I'm also a Jordan Peterson fan, so I quite like him. He's not really a creator, but there's a lot of content of him around. Those are probably the big ones, mostly in this development space, actually. Now that I think
that's where we're all headed, it seems like. What are your thoughts on AI? You mentioned speaking with a personal voice and having digital twins and stuff like that. I've seen, I don't know if it's like just still in beta testing or if it's actually like fully rolled out now where we can like buy one essentially or make one, but you can have like, an AI version of Johnny that's basically like, you can even have like a podcast with it or whatever. It's like, you could kind of tell, but it's pretty good. It's trained on, you give it all the stuff you've written in the last so many years. And it's a pretty good approximation for the way that you communicate and stuff. I mean, it's gated obviously at the present. Like we don't know what Johnny's going to do right now, but I can kind of maybe predict. But what are your thoughts on leveraging AI like we might leverage a bicycle or an automobile versus maybe having a chauffeur or something like that? Like what are your thoughts in terms of identity and communication and that intersection?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure. I think where it's at right now, it would be very hard to build a personal brand with AI. I think it would not be worth the effort, actually. Like, you could probably do it if you wanted to, but I don't think it would save you as much time as if you were creating general information with AI, just because it misses too much. Like, you'd have to get AI to generate very personal photos and videos, and then have that tie in together. Like, it's about how it all comes together, right? AI is very, very good at creating kind of one specific piece of content and making that feel really real and believable. But the whole picture together, I think it'd be quite a lot of effort to make that happen, and it'd just be easier to actually just be yourself. I think if you were going to do that, but that might change. I'm not sure. Like, if I could plug in everything that I've done on Twitter into a machine learning model, and after years, with years of worth of data, maybe you could simulate something similar in the future. That's somewhat of a bit scary thought, but we'll have to wait and see, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar experience when a ChatGPT 3.5 rolled out in November 2022. And there's a lot of buzz, deservedly, and many people thought, this is the future. And I explored like how much it could help write faster. And so like I'd seed in content and say, write me an article like on this, and I'd compare it to kind of what I had in mind. And it's like sometimes it kind of surprise and deliver, and but more often than not, I found anyway. I don't know if I'm maybe a better prompt engineer could have better results, but I found exactly what you said, in that I was actually spending at least as much time, I think perhaps more time, trying to retrofit the AI model to be something that I would feel content like having written myself, to the point. And also I felt, I don't know if this is true or just different, but you're kind of missing out on the whole point. It's like trying to find a way to get stronger without exercise. And it's like, well, maybe like there's stuff in there that's all part of the process. Like just do it and just enjoy the journey. And maybe if you really don't enjoy it, that's not what you're supposed to do. I mean, maybe explore that as well. So now I don't really use it at all for writing, but I do use it sometimes. It's just like a reference. Like, here's my thoughts on this. Like, what do you think about that? Have it bounce stuff back. Usually because, speaking of cost being a limitation, words are cheap to it. So you ask it for a summary, and the summary will be longer than what you're asking it to summarize. So I think you have to kind of know its limitations to some extent. What's been your experience with ChatGPT or AI models?
Maybe a couple of months ago, I was using AI. So I use something called Tweet Hunter, which has like a daily AI. It gives you like a sample of daily AI prompts that help you kind of with your writing. And I did use that at the time. But that was before I'd switched my frame. So I was still kind of writing more general information. And, on days where I felt like I didn't have any ideas and I needed help, that did feel like a useful tool. And I should add, like at the time, I was also looking for a lot of inspiration. So I was looking at other creators, looking at what they were writing. The Tweet Hunter plugin actually also gives you high performing. It gives you like a collection of like high performing tweets, and I was looking towards that for inspiration as well. But ever since I started framing my content around my life has actually become much, much easier. So I don't use any of that anymore. And I don't really even read other people's tweets very often anymore. I'm literally I wake up and I write about my own experiences. And that content seems to perform much better than the stuff where I'm kind of like trying to find inspiration and come up with a concept. The stuff where I just wake up and I talk about myself is actually performing better. And it's much, much easier to write, because literally all I have to do is write about myself. And that's not a hard thing to do, right? Rather than having to come up with an idea,
Yeah, I mean, some people do that, and I'm grateful for that. But I think you need to listen to the see what resonates, and if you don't have the passion or the drive, maybe explore why that might be, and see how maybe it's like a combination where it's like click, it finally clicks, and you realize, oh, start using AI, and I don't need AI. Whereas if you're trying, I mean, I'm not saying you should never challenge yourself. Like, sure, go ahead and try new things. But sometimes you pick up like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And then you find what you want to do. Do you write with like pen and paper?
I like to write my to-do list with pen and paper. So I have like a little to-do list thing that I use every day. That I like to write with pen and paper. That's about it, actually.
I've noticed there's a difference between typing and writing with some utensil, pencil or pen. So I was just curious, like if you've done that, if you just discovered the same thing, but I don't know if a to-do list is enough data to go off of. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've always favored typing, to be honest. I've tried the handwriting thing. Like I used to, when I started journaling. I tried handwriting when I started the gratitude kind of journaling. I also tried handwriting, but I actually just prefer typing. I think part of it is actually that it's just faster to type for me. And this is a problem that I've always had, actually, even with like meetings and running workshops with clients and stuff like that, is I tend to talk too quickly because my brain is just moving faster than I can speak. And so with that in mind, like my brain moves much, much faster than I can write. But typing actually is it keeps up with the speed. I can type as fast as I think, which helps. So yeah, I don't know.
I wonder if there might be different thoughts that come at different paces. Like there's fast thoughts when you're typing whatever 200 words a minute. And then there's like slow thoughts that come when you're restrained, going back to that notion of restraint or limitation rather.
Yeah, I'm sure there's something to it. Maybe I'm missing out on something, but for me, I've tried it multiple times and it just doesn't work for me. Like I don't find any benefit like from writing with pen and paper. And so I stopped doing it.
Yeah, fair enough. That is interesting to hear, that you can still derive just as much satisfaction from typing pretty much exclusively. Do you read any books?
I do. Mostly like right now I'm reading mostly about creator related books. At the moment I'm reading a book called Advertising by, I don't know how to say his name, Ogilvy. He's like an old school marketing guy, advertising guy. I think he's the guy that he's like what Mad Men was based on.
Oh, okay. Like about psychology and stuff and how to market.
It is psychological, but it is in the context of advertising copywriting.
What's like a high level takeaway so far?
It's actually less about at a low level, it is about how you write, but I think more importantly, it's about what you write about. And so it is psychological. You're kind of speaking towards people's deep-rooted emotions, really. So that, dreams, hopes, fears, desires, basic needs, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have like a reading list that you're, it's kind of like your continuing education?
I'm weird when in terms of I read. Every now and then I come across a book that I get really sucked in on and I read it really, really quickly. But that's quite rare. Usually I have like 5 different books that I'm reading here and there when I feel like I need it. I don't really know why, but yeah, so I'm reading Ogilvy, Advertising by Ogilvy. I'm reading Superfans, what my Twitter brand is based on. What else am I reading? There's a couple, I'm trying to get my way through Thinking Fast and Slow again. I've been trying to read that properly for years now. Every now and then I'll go into a phase where I read for a bit and then it just becomes too heavy and I get a bit sick of it. But that's a great book as well. And then The Inner Game of Tennis. I've been reading that as well, which, because I play some badminton and very similar sports.
So the inner game of tennis, is that something that could be applied to anything, or is it specific to tennis? Like I'm thinking more like the mindset, kind of strength under pressure, stuff like that.
Yeah, I actually think that book, it's a shame that it's branded around tennis because it can help with basically any aspect of life, actually. It has been a very, very good read. I think anyone could benefit from reading it.
Well, I'll ask the same question. What's one thing you want to share from that book?
In a Game of Tennis? Yeah, so I guess the big takeaway is around your like active thinking mind and then your kind of subconscious mind. And, I think the big message from that book is around trusting your subconscious mind more. And using your thinking mind less, which actually is very similar to Thinking Fast and Slow, if I think about it really. But the premise behind the book is that if you go into a game of tennis and you're thinking too much about what you're doing, you're probably not going to do very well. And that's been my experience with basically any sport that I played, especially with badminton. And so, I think the message is that you want to do most of your thinking off the court. And then, things that you want to practice, you put in the reps and you practice off the court. But once you go onto the court and you're playing like an important match or whatever, you really will kind of want to let your subconscious mind take over and be present in the moment and trust that your body is going to do what it needs to do. And this, it doesn't sound very compelling described, but once you've experienced that feeling, it's almost magical that you can kind of not be thinking, but performing at a much higher level than if you were thinking. That's
flow state, right?
flow state, exactly.
That's great. Yeah, I'll check out that book. You mentioned that you've coached people. Do you personally have a mentor or mentees that you keep on the regular?
Yeah, so I have a mentor, and he's helped me a lot. I think that whole transition from writing, in a you should and kind of frame, and then transitioning to writing in how that came from him. So, and now from him, I'm also learning lead generation as well as sales, putting together my offer, monetization, because I don't have any experience making money online before this. Before this little adventure, I always made my money from my 9 to 5. So there's lots of skills that I've had to kind of learn in order to monetize. So I do have a mentor, and he's great. And yeah, I'm coaching someone as well. So I have a mentee that I'm helping to. We just did a rebrand. I'm helping him grow now, and that's going really well. So I'm really excited about that as well.
Nice. What area would you like to focus on, like leveraging your experience and your skills? What would you like to apply it to?
Yeah. It's interesting because I've found that coming onto the creator business, I guess, or creator economy, a lot of my background and professional accolades and achievements and stuff, they don't actually help very much, actually. And in some ways, it's a bit of a disadvantage. I think one of the biggest things in the creator economy is probably the emotion of hope, actually. People want to see that it's possible, and they want to see that it can be done. But it really helps when people see that it can be done by your average person, right? And so, I do position myself, with my authority in terms of working at Disney and my professional experience, because that's helps me stand out, and that's a big part of who I am. And so, I can't be authentic without being that. But it's just as powerful for someone who, is 18 years old, has struggled with, multiple kind of online businesses, and is now finally making it work. That story is very, very powerful because it gives everyone who doesn't have, a background like mine, hope that they can also make it work. And so, I think right now I'm trying to balance the tension between, not alienating myself too much from the audience, and be able to resonate with them and be relatable and all of those types of things. So actually right now it's not really necessarily about how much I leverage my existing skills, because they're not super relevant actually. And then I think once I've grown and I have a bigger brand with a bigger audience and more authority, I think there'll be more opportunity for me to leverage my background, and position myself more as a thought leader, I guess. But I don't think I'm quite there yet. And so, relatability is still very important for my brand. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of where my thinking is at.
More than answered my question. That's that was very well said. I think I can see how you got to where you got to. So you have the brands, which in and of themselves are containers to an extent, but they're also signals of a certain amount of determination or skill. But yet, depending on the mindset, that could be a limitation where you feel that you don't need to learn anymore, or you feel that you can overfit and apply it to something that maybe you should have humility going into. It sounds like you have that humility. You're putting in your dues, but you also have you're building kind of a bridge between different domains. So I think, you're obviously good at what you do, and I think you'll continue to be, to generate super fans and grow a significant brand. So it's cool that I knew you back then. I talked to you, before you blew up. I think, that's definitely going to serve you well in the times to come.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for saying that. There's a kind words, and I appreciate it.
So where would you like to point people to follow you or to, see what you're doing?
Yeah, really. I mean, it'd be my Twitter. So that the handle is Johnny, JOHNNY, then with an X, and then Wang, WANG. So all one word. That's where I'm doing everything. I haven't really branched out beyond that yet.
I'll be waiting to read that post about Dr. K.
Yep. I'm looking forward to writing it.
All right. Well, thanks for talking to us today. Good luck.
Yep. Thanks so much for your time, man. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise.